Ever wonder why your decisions don't always lead to the expected outcomes? You're not alone in this. The human mind, as powerful as it is, isn't immune to blind spots. These blind spots are known as psychological biases, and they can significantly influence our perspective of reality and our decision-making abilities. Imagine your mind as a complex machine, processing a myriad of information every moment. To work efficiently, it uses shortcuts known as heuristics. These heuristics are useful most of the time, helping us make quick decisions without having to analyze every single bit of information. But sometimes they can lead us astray, causing us to make decisions based on flawed reasoning. This is where biases come into play. Biases are like invisible forces that pull our thinking in a certain direction, away from objective reality. They are deviations from logic and reason, often based on our personal experiences, beliefs, and perceptions. They are the silent puppeteers behind our thoughts and actions, often operating without our conscious awareness. From the confirmation bias that makes us favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, to the availability bias that makes us overestimate the likelihood of events that come readily to our minds, these biases can distort our perception of reality and lead us to make decisions that are not in our best interest. Understanding these biases is the first step towards minimizing their impact on our decision-making process. It's like shining a light on the dark corners of our minds, exposing these hidden puppeteers for what they really are. By recognizing these biases, we can start making more informed decisions, grounded in reality rather than distorted by our personal biases. And so we embark on a journey to explore these biases, to understand their power, and to learn how to navigate through their deceptive allure. We'll delve into 25 psychological biases, as explained by Charles Munger, one of the most influential thinkers of our time. It's time to unveil these hidden influences. Get ready for a deep dive into the world of bias. The first set of biases we will explore are reward and punishment, super response tendency, liking loving tendency, disliking hating tendency, doubt avoidance tendency, and inconsistency avoidance tendency. Let's delve into the reward and punishment super response tendency. Think about a child who behaves well in anticipation of a treat, or perhaps a colleague who works overtime to avoid reprimand. This is the reward and punishment super response tendency in action. We're wired to respond strongly to incentives and penalties, which can sometimes cloud our judgment. Next up, the liking loving tendency. Ever find yourself agreeing with someone simply because you like them? That's your liking loving tendency at work. We're often swayed by our affections, leading us to favor those we like and agree with their viewpoints, sometimes blindly. On the flip side, we have the disliking hating tendency. This is when our negative emotions towards someone or something influence our decisions. For instance, disliking a movie because the lead actor rubs you the wrong way. Our emotions can often get the best of us, leading to biased decision-making. The doubt avoidance tendency is our inclination to make quick decisions to avoid feelings of uncertainty or doubt. It's like choosing a restaurant not because it's the best, but because it's familiar and safe. This tendency can often lead us to make hasty and potentially harmful decisions. Lastly, the inconsistency avoidance tendency. This is our tendency to resist change and stick to our beliefs, even when presented with new information. Think of a time when you held onto an outdated phone, not because it was the best, but simply because you were used to it. This tendency can hinder our growth and prevent us from adapting to new circumstances. So, there you have it. The first 5 biases that subtly, yet powerfully shape our behaviors, decisions, and perceptions. Understanding these biases can help us navigate our lives more consciously, making decisions that are truly in our best interest. These biases can affect our decisions, relationships, and how we perceive ourselves and others. Next, we're going to delve into curiosity tendency, Kantian fairness tendency, envy, jealousy tendency, reciprocation tendency, and influence from mere association tendency. Our first stop on this journey through bias is the curiosity tendency. This is the hardwired impulse we all have to seek out and absorb new information. It's what drives us to click on intriguing headlines or watch a movie because everyone's talking about it. It's a powerful driver of human behavior, but it can also lead us astray, causing us to spend time on unimportant details while missing the big picture. Then there's the Kantian fairness tendency. Named after philosopher Immanuel Kant, this bias refers to our innate sense of fairness. We're more likely to act in ways that we perceive as fair, even if they're not necessarily the most rational or beneficial. Think of the times you've gone out of your way to ensure everyone gets an equal slice of the pie, even when it wasn't strictly necessary. Next up is the envy-jealousy tendency. This one is pretty self-explanatory. We've all felt the sting of envy when someone else has something we want. This can motivate us to strive for more, but it can also lead to negative emotions and detrimental behaviors. The fourth bias in our list is the reciprocation tendency. We're hardwired to want to return favors, to reciprocate when someone does something nice for us. This can be a powerful tool for building relationships, but it can also be manipulated, leading us to make decisions that aren't in our best interest. Finally, we come to the influence from mere association tendency. This is the bias that leads us to form opinions based on our associations. Think of a celebrity endorsement. We're more likely to have a positive view of a product if it's associated with someone we admire. These biases are all part of the human experience, woven into the fabric of our decision-making processes. Recognizing them can help us better navigate our personal and professional lives. Scene script. Let's now explore simple, pain-avoiding psychological denial, excessive self-regard tendency, over-optimism tendency, deprival super-reaction tendency, and social proof tendency. We'll start with simple, pain-avoiding psychological denial. This is when we choose to deny the reality of certain situations because it's too uncomfortable or distressing to accept. Imagine you've just spun out your brand new car. Instead of acknowledging the fact that you were speeding, you blame the weather, the car, just about anything else but your own actions. That's psychological denial in action. Next up is the excessive self-regard tendency. We all like to think we're pretty good at things we do, right? But sometimes, this confidence can blind us to our own flaws and limitations. Picture yourself at a karaoke night, belting out tunes, convinced you're the next Adele or Ed Sheeran, even when your friends are cringing. That's excessive self-regard at play. Then we have the over-optimism tendency. This is when we're overly optimistic about the outcome of situations, often ignoring potential risks. Like when you buy a lottery ticket, fully convinced that you're going to win, even though the odds are astronomically against you. That's the over-optimism tendency for you. Moving on, we find the deprival super-reaction tendency. This bias kicks in when we react stronger to the possibility of losing something than to the prospect of gaining something of equal value. Think about how you feel when you lose a $20 bill compared to finding one. The pain of loss is often more intense than the joy of gain. Finally, there's the social proof tendency. We humans are social creatures and tend to do what others are doing. Like when you see a long queue outside a restaurant and assume it must be good. That's the social proof tendency in action. These biases can greatly influence our behaviors and how we interact with the world around us. The more aware we are of these biases, the better we can navigate our decisions and our lives. On the list now are contrast misreaction tendency, stress influence tendency, availability misweighing tendency, use it or lose it tendency, and drug misinfluence tendency. First, we have the contrast misreaction tendency. It's when we judge something by comparing it to what we've just seen or experienced. Think about how a lukewarm bath feels scorching hot after being in a cold pool. Next is the stress influence tendency, where our judgment gets clouded under high stress. It's like when you can't think straight during a heated argument. The availability misweighing tendency is when we give more weight to information that's readily available. It's why sensational news stories can skew our perception of reality. The use it or lose it tendency refers to our mental and physical abilities. If we don't use them, they weaken over time, just like muscles that atrophy from lack of exercise. Finally, the drug misinfluence tendency is the bias where drugs and alcohol distort our thinking. It's why you shouldn't make important decisions under the influence. Understanding these biases can help us control our reactions and make better decisions. Finally, we have senescence misinfluence tendency, authority misinfluence tendency, twaddle tendency, reason-respecting tendency, and lollapalooza tendency. The senescence misinfluence tendency is our bias towards comfort and familiarity as we age. Yes, we tend to stick to what we know, even if it's not the best choice. Next, the authority misinfluence tendency. This is our inclination to follow the crowd, especially if that crowd is led by a figure of authority. It's like when you see everyone lining up for a new restaurant, you assume it must be good. Then we have the twaddle tendency, which is our propensity to focus on meaningless information, or twaddle, rather than the core issue. Like when we get caught up in the drama of a situation rather than addressing the problem itself. The reason-respecting tendency is our bias towards explanations, even if they're not entirely accurate. We prefer a flawed reason over no reason at all. Lastly, the Lollapalooza tendency is when multiple biases collide, leading to extreme outcomes. By being aware of these biases, we can strive to overcome them and improve our judgment and decision-making. Now that we've explored the 25 psychological biases, let's recap. We started our journey with the first 5 biases, delving into the realms of reward and punishment, liking or loving bias, disliking or hating bias, doubt avoidance, and inconsistency avoidance. These biases, often subconscious, shape our interactions and decisions in ways we might not even realize. We then journeyed through biases 6 to 10, exploring commitment and consistency, reciprocation tendency, over-influence by authority, deprivation superreaction, and the contrast misreaction tendency. Each of these biases can sway our perceptions, often leading us to act or react in ways that might not be in our best interest. Moving on to biases 11 to 15, we uncovered the reasons behind over-optimism tendency, the social proof tendency, stress influence tendency, availability misweighing tendency, and the use it or lose it tendency. Each of these biases can cloud our judgment, making it vital to recognize and navigate around them. In the realm of biases 16 to 20, we explored the drug misinfluence tendency, senescence misinfluence, authority misinfluence, twaddle tendency, and reason-respecting tendency. These biases remind us of the power of influence, how it can be used and misused. Finally, we ventured into the last 5 biases, 21 to 25, exploring the lattice work effect, the contrast-caused distortions, the over-influence by vivid or dramatic instances, the man with a hammer tendency, and the always-be-closing tendency. These biases illustrate the subtleties of our decision-making processes and how they can be easily swayed by seemingly insignificant factors. The importance of understanding these biases cannot be overstated. They can impact our lives in profound ways, influencing our decisions, our interactions, and our perceptions of the world around us. Remember, knowledge is power. By understanding these biases, we can make better decisions and improve our lives. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more enlightening content.